The courtroom froze the moment the old man crossed the threshold. An 84-year-old drifter with a battered shopping cart wrapped in a weather-faded tarp, limping toward Judge Frank Caprio, as if every step cost him a year of his life. His name was Harry Mercer, charged with stealing a $3.49 can of soup. On paper, it was nothing, but the way he clutched that cart, the way his eyes flicked toward it like he was guarding something sacred, told everyone this case was about to become anything but ordinary. And when that tarp finally came off, when the truth spilled into the courtroom, light every single person forgot to breathe. What Harry had carried for more than half a century wasn't junk. It was a secret so heavy, so heartbreaking, that even Judge Caprio himself stood stunned in silence. Before we dive deeper, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. And if you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because what you're about to witness is a story you'll never forget. Harry Mercer didn't walk so much as drift slow, deliberate, as if the weight of decades pressed on his back. His jacket was 2 sizes too big, sleeves frayed, patched so often the original fabric had vanished long ago. His boots, cracked and uneven, slapped against the courthouse tiles with a hollow sound that echoed far longer than they should have. People in the gallery shifted, murmured, then fell silent, studying him with a strange mix of pity and curiosity. But Harry's eyes stayed forward. They were pale, blue-clouded, tired but strangely alert, scanning the room with the instincts of someone who'd spent a lifetime trying to predict danger. Just as he reached the defendant's table, his leg buckled. The room gasped. His canea crooked branch he had carved himself slid out of his grip. Harry crashed to one knee, the shopping cart rattling violently. A stack of weathered envelopes spilled onto the floor like autumn leaves. He scrambled for them, not the cane, not his balance, but the envelopes. His hands shaking as he stuffed each one back beneath the tarp with frantic precision. This tiny moment of panic was what made Judge Caprio lean forward. Harry's fear wasn't about embarrassment. It was about something inside that cart. "Are you all right, sir?" Judge Caprio asked gently. Harry didn't answer. He simply forced himself upright, brushing dust off his sleeve, clutching his cart once more. Only then did he lift his chin toward the bench. "Yes, Your Honor," he said quietly. "Just a slip." His voice carried the kind of gravel that came from years of shouting over helicopters, gunfire, or the roar of an engine on a battlefield. A voice that didn't belong to a petty thief. The clerk adjusted his glasses and read aloud, State of Rhode Island versus Harry Mercer. Charge, shoplifting. Judge Caprio folded his hands. "Mr. Mercer, you're accused of taking a can of soup from Lambert's Market without paying. How do you plead?" Harry didn't rush his answer. He glanced at the floor, then back up. "Guilty, Your Honor. No excuses, no explanation." Caprio's voice softened. "Would you like to tell me why you couldn't pay for it?" Harry shook his head. "Doesn't matter, sir. I took it." "But your circumstances matter to this court," Caprio insisted. Harry swallowed, jaw clenching. The courtroom watched him with the same delicate attention they might give a trembling bird. "I haven't had steady work in a long time," he finally admitted. "Been doing odd jobs. Cleaning lots, fixing fences, whatever comes along." "And where are you living now?" Harry hesitated. "Wherever there's room. Sometimes under the overpass. Sometimes near the river. Depends on the weather." A ripple of sadness moved through the courtroom. Judge Caprio studied him more closely, his trembling fingers. The way he instinctively angled his body between himself and the cart. "How long have you been homeless?" Caprio asked. 8 years, Harry replied. Since things went wrong." The judge didn't push yet. Instead, he asked, "What kind of work did you do before that?" Harry straightened by a fraction. Not pride exactly, but memory. "I served, sir. U.S. Army, Korea, and then Iraq. Many years apart. Different wars. Same ghosts." A murmur rose through the gallery. A man who had fought in 2 different eras of war now stood here, charged with stealing soup to survive. Judge Caprio leaned back slowly. You served in Korea? Yes, Your Honor. 1953. I was 19. Thought I knew the world. I was wrong. And Iraq, 2004. They called old vets back for support roles. I trained younger guys. Helped with intel. We lost. Many. Harry's voice drifted, and for a moment he wasn't in the courtroom at all, but somewhere dusty, hot, loud. Mr. Mercer, Caprio said carefully, thank you for your service. Truly. Harry nodded once, but didn't smile. Service was not a memory he wore comfortably. Did you receive veterans' benefits after your service? Caprio asked. I did, Harry said. Until they stopped. Mix-up in paperwork. By the time I figured it out, I'd lost my apartment. One thing led to another. He lifted one hand slightly, showing the faint tremor that age and hardship had carved into him. But I manage, he added. Tried to anyway. Judge Caprio looked down at the file again, but realized it contained only the charge, not the man. He set it aside. Mr. Mercer, he said quietly, you mentioned earlier that things went wrong. May I ask what you meant? Harry's breathing changed, small, shallow, protective. That's not something I like talking about, Your Honor. Is it something related to your time in service? Harry shook his head. Something after, something personal. Judge Caprio didn't push. His voice softened. You're not required to share anything beyond what you're comfortable with. Harry's eyes flickered, grateful. But Caprio noticed the way Harry's hand almost subconsciously slid back to the cart, resting on it like a lifeline. What's in the cart, Mr. Mercer? Caprio asked carefully. A wave of tension swept through Harry's body. His shoulders tightened. His grip turned white around the handle. Just things, he murmured. Nothing important. But the panic behind his voice told a different story. Caprio had seen thousands of defendants. He knew when someone was hiding guilt and when they were hiding wounds. Mr. Mercer, he said gently, I'm not asking out of suspicion. I'm asking because I want to understand you. Harry said nothing. Caprio tried again. Is it something of sentimental value? Harry's jaw tightened. Everything in this cart is sentimental value, he whispered. The audience shifted. The moment felt fragile, like a thin pane of glass between Harry and the world. Judge Caprio nodded slowly. I can see that. Harry looked up, startled. No one ever said they understood. No one ever even tried. Caprio continued. You guard that cart as if it contains lives. Harry froze. As if the judge had spoken a truth he had no intention of revealing. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Mercer, may I ask how long you've been pushing that cart? Harry took a long breath. 17 years. A few people gasped softly. 17 years, Caprio repeated. You've kept the same cart that long. It's the only home I've got left, sir, Harry murmured. And everything in it. They're all I have. Judge Caprio let the silence stretch. He knew some truths came out only if the room was still enough to hold them. Then he spoke quietly. Mr. Mercer, I can tell this case is not about a can of soup. Harry stared at him, eyes watering but refusing to fall. No, Your Honor, he whispered. It's not. Caprio stepped back from the bench and took a breath. He knew the next question mattered. He knew it could either shatter the wall Harry had built or drive him deeper into silence. Mr. Mercer, he said gently, will you allow us to understand what you've been carrying? The courtroom leaned in. Harry's fingers trembled on the handle. His throat bobbed. I don't know if people should see it, he whispered. They might not understand. Try us, Judge Caprio said softly. You're safe here. Harry closed his eyes, and for the first time, he looked like a man standing on the edge of a cliff, ready to reveal something he had hidden from the world for more than half a lifetime. With a shaking breath, he nodded. I'll show you, Your Honor. Harry's hands hovered over the faded blue tarp like they were touching the surface of a coffin, hesitant, reverent, terrified of what opening it might unleash. The entire courtroom, felt the tension rising like a tide. Even the officers standing by the wall straightened, sensing something monumental unfolding in front of them. He curled his fingers around the edge of the tarp, then stopped. "Your Honor," he said quietly, "I want you to understand something before I do this." Judge Caprio nodded. "Go ahead, Mr. Mercer." Harry swallowed hard. "People, they see a homeless man with a cart. They think it's trash, just junk I picked up along the way. But this isn't trash. These aren't things I chose to carry. They're things I couldn't leave behind." His voice was trembling, but not from fear, from something deeper, something sacred. Caprio nodded again, softer this time. "We understand, Mr. Mercer. Take your time." Harry took a long, painful breath, as if bracing himself against a memory that had followed him for decades. Then he slowly pulled the tarp back. A ripple of air escaped, carrying the dry, dusty scent of old paper, metal, and time. And the room froze. Inside the cart wasn't clothing, food, or random possessions. It was a shrine, a portable memorial, a lifetime of ghosts carefully preserved. Stacked with impossible precision were hundreds of envelopes, photographs, laminated name tags, military patches, journal notebooks with bent corners, dog tags strung together like wind chimes, folded flags, pins, ribbons, and small wooden boxes carved with initials. Each item placed deliberately, protected like holy relics. A collective gasp swept through the courtroom. An officer whispered, "My God." A woman in the back covered her mouth, tears already forming. Judge Caprio stepped down from the bench. He didn't plan it. He moved instinctively, pulled by gravity toward the cart, as if it were radiating something ancient and human. He approached slowly. "Mr. Mercer, what is all of this?" Harry reached into the cart with trembling fingers and gently lifted a stack of photographs, black and white images, yellowed at the edges. "These," he said quietly, "are boys from my unit in Korea, 19, 20, some younger. I promised I wouldn't forget them." He set the stack down with the care one gives to fragile bones. Then he pulled out a second stack, color photos this time, rougher, dustier. "And these are from Iraq. I wasn't on the front lines that time, but the young ones were. Some of them called me Pops, said I reminded them of home." He smiled, a broken, fleeting smile. Most of them never made it home. The courtroom fell into a silence so complete, it was almost physical. Harry lifted a weathered wooden box, the size of a lunch pail, worn smooth from years of handling. 12 names were carved on the lid, some deeply etched, some faint and faded. This belonged to my squad. 12 men, good men, brave men. I keep it with me always so they aren't alone anymore. Not where they fell." His voice cracked, not from age, but from a grief that had never healed. An older man in the second row wiped his eyes. "Lord have mercy." Harry set the box down and reached deeper into the cart. He pulled out a small tin container filled with folded letters, some still sealed. "These are letters soldiers wrote the night before they died. Letters that never made it home. I've spent decades trying to deliver as many as I can." Caprio's breath caught. "How many have you delivered?" "A little over 100, Harry whispered. "But some families moved. Some changed names. Some never wanted reminders. And some I never found." He closed the tin gently, like closing the lid on a chapter of history. Then something unexpected happened. A man in the gallery, a young veteran with a buzz cut, maybe in his late 20s, stood up despite protocol. "Sir," he said, voice cracking, "my dad served in Iraq. He lost a lot of friends, too. If even one person had cared about their memories the way you have." He couldn't finish. He sank back into his seat, wiping tears. Harry nodded back at him with heavy gratitude. Judge Caprio leaned in closer. "Mr. Mercer, why carry all of this? Why take it with you everywhere?" Harry lowered himself slowly onto the small bench beside the cart, as if the answer were too heavy to say while standing. Because, Your Honor, he paused, fighting his emotion. When you survive something others don't, you carry them with you, literally, figuratively, every day. And if you don't keep their stories alive, then it's like losing them twice. Those words hit the courtroom like a wave. A woman started crying softly. An officer looked away, blinking hard. Harry reached again and pulled out a stack of laminated cards, each one with a photograph, a name, a date of death, and a handwritten note on the back. These were boys I trained in Iraq. I wrote down something about each of them, something good, something their families would have wanted someone to remember. He handed one to Judge Caprio. The judge hesitated, then accepted it with both hands. On the front, a young soldier smiling awkwardly, dusty from the field. On the back, in Harry's shaky handwriting, he always gave his dessert to the new guys, said they needed sweetness more than he did. Judge Caprio's voice grew thick. Mr. Mercer, this is extraordinary. Harry shook his head as tears pooled in his eyes. No, sir. Extraordinary is what they were. I'm just the last one left to say their names. The judge had to look away for a moment, regaining control of his breath. But Harry wasn't done. He reached into the very bottom of the cart and pulled out a battered green canvas journal. Its spine was cracked, held together with duct tape and determination. This, he whispered, is the record of my life with them. Every story, every memory, everything I couldn't forget even when I tried. I've written in it for 70 years. The judge reached out, but Harry pulled the notebook close to his chest first. You can read it, Harry said, but be gentle. These are their lives. Caprio nodded and accepted the journal carefully, almost reverently. The first page made the judge's eyes widen. It was a list, a long list, hundreds of names written in careful rows, dates, units, places of death, personal notes. Mr. Mercer, Caprio whispered, you've documented every fallen soldier you ever served with. Harry nodded. And some I didn't. Whenever I heard about a soldier whose family had no one left, I added them too. Someone has to remember them. The room was silent except for the faint sound of someone crying in the third row. Even the bailiffs, hardened by years of courtroom emotion, looked shaken. But then the moment cracked. A voice from near the back sharp, careless, whispered, "Why drag all that junk around?" Harry froze. He didn't turn. He didn't move his head, but his whole body stiffened like a wire pulled taut. Judge Caprio's face snapped up, stern. Who said that? No one answered. But the damage had been done. Harry lifted his head slowly and spoke, his voice low, raw, trembling with righteous anger. It's not junk. Everyone fell still. These are lives, he said, louder now, his voice echoing against the wooden walls. Boys who never got to grow old. Boys who gave everything. Boys whose families cried over empty chairs at dinner tables for decades. He reached into the cart, lifted a pair of dog tags, and held them up with shaking hands. This belonged to Private Andrew Collins. He was 19. We talked about fishing we'd do when we got home, but he never got home. And you call this junk? The courtroom felt like a church suddenly, holy, grieving, sacred. Harry pressed the dog tags to his heart and bowed his head. I carry them, he whispered, because no one else did. Judge Caprio stepped closer, voice gentle but firm. Mr. Mercer, thank you for showing us. Harry wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. I wasn't sure anyone would understand, he murmured. But thank you for listening. Judge Caprio nodded, fully understanding the gravity of the moment. Mr. Mercer, he said softly, your cart doesn't carry junk. It carries the weight of a nation. Those words broke something open in the room, an invisible barrier of misunderstanding and judgment. Harry closed the tarp again, slowly, as if tucking old souls safely back to sleep. And for the first time in decades, he didn't look like a man burdened. He looked like a man seen. Harry sat there with one hand resting on the cart, breathing slowly, like a man who had just exhaled a lifetime of secrets. The courtroom remained utterly still. Nobody dared move. Nobody dared even clear their throat. It felt as if every person in that room had been transported somewhere far away. A dusty battlefield, a silent barrack, a midnight convoy where young men whispered promises they never lived long enough to keep. Judge Caprio eased himself onto the bench at the front of the courtroom. But he didn't lift the gavel or reach for the file. Instead, he leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees, studying Harry like a historian tracing the face of a war monument. "Mr. Mercer," he said quietly, "what you've shown us, it's more than remembrance. It's a life's work." Harry nodded slowly, eyes lowered. "I guess it just became what I was meant to do." Caprio's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Meant to do." Harry took a deep breath, as though preparing to peel open another chapter he'd sealed shut long ago. "It started with 12. 12, Caprio asked gently. Harry placed a trembling hand on the wooden box in the cart, the one carved with 12 names. He lifted it again, holding it on his lap. 12 boys, he explained. Korea, my squad. They were my brothers. I was their sergeant. The night everything went wrong, the night I should have died with them, his voice drifted into a fragile whisper. The courtroom leaned in, almost afraid to breathe. "We were pinned in a valley near Huachan," Harry continued, staring at a point in the air that only he could see. "It was cold, God. It was cold. We didn't sleep much. We just waited to see which one of us wouldn't make it through the night." He swallowed hard. The attack came just before dawn. Mortars, machine gun fire. We were scattered. I got blown back, hit my head. I couldn't hear anything but ringing. When I crawled to them, it was already too late. A tear slid down his cheek, though his expression remained strangely calm, like someone who had cried the same tear 1,000 times before. I was the only one left. I didn't deserve to be. Caprio's voice softened so much it barely carried across the room. "Survival isn't a matter of deserving, Mr. Mercer." Harry shook his head. "Maybe not, but living with it is." He opened the wooden box and turned it toward the courtroom. Inside were 12 small objects, a rusted Zippo, a bullet flattened on one side, a harmonica missing a reed, a rosary with a broken chain, a birthday card signed by a little sister, tiny fragments of human stories. "I gathered these after the battle," Harry said. "I didn't know what else to do. I thought I'd return them to their families. But by the time I made it home, some had moved. Others had already passed. The country was different. The war was old news." Caprio nodded slowly. He'd lived long enough to know how the world often forgot its own heroes while chasing the next headline. "So I kept them," Harry whispered. "All 12. And I promised I'd carry their memories until the day I died." He let out a sad, broken chuckle. "But I didn't expect to still be here, 70 years later." For a moment, the only sound was the faint buzzing of the fluorescent lights above them. Then Harry reached deeper into the cart and pulled out a different set of photos. These ones newer, laminated, still crisp. "After Korea, I tried to move on," he said. "Got married, had a daughter, built something like a life." He paused, letting the weight of the word tried settle. But the memories didn't go away. And when Iraq started, I felt like I owed something. Like maybe I could protect someone this time. Caprio leaned in. "Did you?" "Oh, I tried," Harry murmured, "but you can't protect everyone. War has its own plans." He spread the photos across the bench in a neat row. Young men, wide smiles, some too young to legally drink. I trained them, watched them grow stronger, watched them become brothers. And then I watched them die. His face tightened, not in anger, but in the exhaustion of someone who had lived the same loss twice. "One night," he said slowly, "after one of our boys got hit by an IED, a 19-year-old kid from Arkansas put a picture in my hand. Said, 'Sarge, if anything happens to me, give this to my mama.'" Caprio swallowed. "And did it?" the judge asked. "No," Harry whispered, "because 2 hours later, He was gone, and his mother had already passed 4 years earlier. He had no one left. Harry looked up, tears hanging from his lashes. So I kept that picture, and then the next one, and the next, and before I knew it, I wasn't just carrying 12 boys. I was carrying dozens, then hundreds. The judge closed his eyes. Behind him, someone sobbed quietly. Another person pressed a hand over their heart. Harry took another breath through, shaky. When I got back home, I tried to go back to normal life. My wife, she tried to help me, she really did. He paused. But when she passed, things started falling apart. Bills, paperwork. My head wasn't right. And one day I woke up and realized I'd lost the apartment, lost my daughter's trust, lost everything except. He nodded toward the cart. Except them. It wasn't self-pity. It was fact. A life boiled down to the barest truth. So I walked, he said, town to town, state to state, for 17 years, looking for families or graves, or somewhere to leave a piece of history that would have otherwise vanished. Why carry it alone? Caprio asked gently. Why never ask for help? Harry's shoulders lifted in a tired shrug. Who was I going to ask? People see an old man with a cart and they cross the street. The world forgets fast. I thought, maybe it was better if I didn't burden anyone. Judge Caprio exhaled a deep, soulful release of breath. Mr. Mercer, this isn't a burden. This is a gift, a sacred responsibility. These stories would have died without you. Harry's eyes flicked upward. You really think so, Your Honor? I do, Caprio said, voice firm, steady, unwavering. And I think you've done more for your country in your silence than most of us do in our entire lives. Harry's lips trembled. His face contorted into something raw, helpless, heartbreaking. Nobody's ever said that to me. Caprio reached out not as a judge, not as an authority figure, but as a man. Then it's about damn time someone did. Harry covered his face with both hands and cried, not loud, not dramatic, not seeking sympathy, just long, quiet, exhausted tears of a man finally allowed to set down a weight he'd carried far too long. The gallery cried with him. Even the officers pretended to adjust their belts or wipe sweat from their brows. But everyone knew what they were really doing. When Harry finally lifted his head again, his cheeks were wet, but his eyes were gentler, like the knot in his chest had loosened for the first time in decades. I didn't mean to cause trouble, he said softly. Stealing that soup, I know it was wrong. I was just cold, tired, hungry. Didn't want to let them down by dying with nothing done. Caprio shook his head. Mr. Mercer, you haven't let anyone down, least of all the men you carry. Harry blinked, stunned. A quiet voice at the back said, trembling, He's a hero. Then another. God bless you, sir. Then another. You honored them more than any monument. Harry looked overwhelmed, embarrassed, humbled, but also finally seen. Caprio lifted the journal again, flipping through a few pages as if holding something priceless. Mr. Mercer, tell us one thing. His voice was steady, reverent. What kept you going all these years? Harry looked at the cart, then at the judge, then at the photos he'd laid out like a mosaic of memories. Them, he said simply. I kept going because they couldn't. And that was the moment, right then, that the entire courtroom understood the truth. This wasn't a story about a homeless man charged with shoplifting. This was the story of a man who had carried a nation on his shoulders longer than anyone realized. And he had carried it alone, until today. Judge Caprio rose slowly from his seat, not with the authority of a judge, but with the reverence of a man standing before something sacred. His eyes lingered on Harry, then drifted to the cart, then back to Harry again, as if he were seeing all the invisible burdens the old veteran had carried across 7 decades. For a moment, he didn't speak. He simply stood there, letting the weight of the moment settle. Then he stepped down from the bench. This was something he almost never did. The gallery murmured, recognizing instantly that the boundaries of a typical courtroom had dissolved. This wasn't about laws anymore. It was about something older, deeper, something human. Caprio approached Harry slowly, giving him time to adjust, to breathe. "Mr. Mercer," he said softly, "I've presided over thousands of cases, maybe more. And I can tell you honestly, nothing has touched me like what you've shared today." Harry's shoulders curled inward slightly, as if embarrassed by the attention. "I didn't mean to make a spectacle, Your Honor," he murmured. Caprio shook his head. "You didn't. You made history." A hush fell over the courtroom. Caprio turned to the gallery. "Ladies and gentlemen, please understand what we're witnessing. This man has carried not just memories, but the very essence of sacrifice. He has preserved what our country should never forget." A few people nodded. Others wiped their eyes. One young man-soldier in uniform sitting near the back stood at attention, his boots clicking sharply together. A small but powerful gesture. Respect. Caprio's eyes softened. "And you've done all of this alone." Harry said nothing. He looked down, his fingers intertwining with the straps of his battered cart. It wasn't shame. It was the posture of someone unused to being praised. Caprio exhaled, then turned back to him. "I'd like to ask you something," he said. "Something personal." Harry swallowed. "All right. Why keep going? All these years. Why keep walking? Why not lay the burden down?" Harry looked up with a quiet, resigned expression that carried the ache of decades. "Because, Your Honor." He paused, searching for words that wouldn't come. "Because they deserved better. Somebody had to say their names. Somebody had to remember the details. Who they were, what they loved, what they never got to finish." His voice quivered. "I always hoped if I carried them long enough, maybe someone would finally listen." Caprio felt something twist deep in his chest. He had to take a moment before he responded. "We're listening now," he said, voice trembling. The courtroom felt like a sanctuary. One of the officers wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. A woman near the front clasped her palms under her chin as though praying. A middle-aged man sniffed loudly, not bothering to hide his emotion anymore. Harry blinked, stunned by the room's compassion. It was as if, for the first time in years, he wasn't invisible. Caprio took another step closer. "Mr. Mercer, may I look inside the cart more closely?" Harry hesitated, then nodded. "Of course. Just be gentle, please." "I will," Caprio promised. He knelt beside the cart, his movements slow, respectful. Inside, the layers of photographs, letters, and keepsakes felt like strata of a life, memories pressed together by years of wind, rain, and time. Caprio lifted a folded American flag, its fabric thin but cared for meticulously. "Whose was this?" he asked. Harry's eyes softened. "Private Samuel Harper. He saved my life in Iraq. I tried to give the flag to his family, but they had moved. No forwarding address." Caprio nodded solemnly. He picked up another item, a purple ribbon tied around a yellowed envelope. "And this? A letter from a soldier to his wife. He wrote it the night before he died. I carried it across 9 states trying to find her. I never did." The judge's throat tightened. He set the letter down, as if placing a relic on an altar. Then Harry reached forward and pulled out something Caprio hadn't touched, yet a small wooden plaque with a hand-carved inscription. "For those who never came home." The edges were sanded smooth by years of handling, and the wood carried faint burn marks from the battlefield where Harry had salvaged it. Caprio stared at it in silence. "Mr. Mercer," he whispered, "you turned your life into a memorial." Harry nodded. "I just didn't want them to be forgotten." A young veteran in the gallery stood abruptly. His voice shook as he addressed the room. "For the record, Your Honor, men like him are the reason some of us made it home." Harry looked stunned. The veteran continued. "If my sergeant had lived long enough to try something like this, to carry the memories of my brothers, I'd want the whole world to honor him, just like we should honor Mr. Mercer today." The entire courtroom erupted into applause. Not loud applause, not celebratory applause, but the soft, rising sound of people acknowledging something sacred. Harry's face crumpled. He wasn't a man prone to public emotion, but he couldn't hold it back anymore. His hands covered his eyes as tears slipped between his fingers. Judge Caprio stepped closer and placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. It was a gesture rarely seen in a courtroom, but today was not a typical day. "Mr. Mercer," Caprio said gently, "for 70 years, you have carried the memories of men who had no one else to carry them. You've done more for your fellow soldiers than most can comprehend. But I need you to hear this." His voice softened even further. "You don't have to carry it alone anymore." Harry's head lifted slowly, disbelief crossing his features. I don't." "No," Caprio said firmly, "not anymore." He turned toward the gallery. "Does anyone here believe this man should bear the weight of these memories by himself?" The response came instantly. "No, sir, absolutely not. Let us help him. We owe him. For our veterans." The room buzzed with emotion. Harry looked overwhelmed, almost frightened by the sudden wave of support. For a man who had lived years invisible, the spotlight felt blinding. Caprio smiled softly. "See, Mr. Mercer, you've carried the stories. Now let us carry you." Harry's lips quivered. I never thought anyone would." Caprio placed a hand over his heart. "You've spent your life honoring others. Today, we honor you." A moment passed, a long, silent, shimmering moment. Finally, Caprio straightened, but his voice remained gentle. "Mr. Mercer, I'm going to ask you something unusual. Would you allow the court to hear one of the stories, one of the ones that stayed with you the longest?" Harry's breath hitched. "Tell one of their stories," he whispered. "Yes," Caprio said. "Help us see them the way you did." Harry's eyes glistened. He looked into the cart, fingers hovering over photos, until he chose one carefully. A young man, smiling next to a tank, dirt smeared across his cheeks. "This is Specialist Jordan Reeves," Harry began softly. He was 20. He always said he wanted to open a bakery when he got home. Said he was going to make cinnamon rolls so good they'd end wars. A soft laugh rippled through the courtroom. Harry's smile trembled. One day, he traded his only pair of dry socks to another soldier just to make the kid smile. Said, "My feet will survive, but that kid's spirit might not." Harry's voice cracked right there. He died saving that same kid. Silence. Then the kid's photograph slipped from Harry's hand and floated gently to the floor. Caprio bent down, picked it up, and held it to his chest, as if protecting a living soul. "Thank you, Mr. Mercer," he whispered, "for giving Specialist Reeves a second life today." Harry nodded, tears falling freely now. He deserved it. The judge returned the photo gently to the cart. "Mr. Mercer," he said softly, "you've given these men immortality." Harry shook his head. "No, Your Honor. I just tried to keep them from fading." Caprio stepped closer, so close that, for the first time in his career, he placed both hands over a defendant's shoulders. "Then let me be clear," he said, voice deep and steady. "As long as this court stands, as long as I draw breath, they will not fade." Harry closed his eyes, every line in his face softening. For the first time in decades, he looked like a man beginning to understand something unfamiliar. He wasn't alone anymore. Judge Caprio had seen men break before him hardened by war, poverty, grief, or life's endless blows. But there was something profoundly different about the way Harry Mercer sat before him now. This wasn't a man collapsing under the weight of shame. This was a man finally letting himself feel a lifetime's worth of sorrow, relief, and fragile hope. And in that vulnerability, something unexpected and monumental was about to emerge. Caprio stepped back toward the bench, but instead of returning to his seat, he paused and looked down at the journal he still held, the one bound in duct tape, its pages yellowed by time and grief. "Mr. Mercer," he said gently, "may I ask you one more question before we move forward?" Harry nodded, his hands nervously twisting the brim of his weathered cap. Of course, Your Honor. Caprio held up the journal. In here there are stories, notes, names, memories. But I noticed something else as I flipped through. There's an envelope tucked inside the back cover. A sealed one. It looks old. The shift in Harry was immediate. His spine stiffened. His eyes widened. His hands froze mid-motion. He looked like a man who'd just been asked to open a locked room inside himself. A room he'd boarded up, nailed shut, and buried under years of silence. I know the one you mean, Harry whispered. Would you tell us what it is? Caprio asked softly. Harry's throat worked, but no sound came out. The gallery held its breath. It's not something I've ever opened, he finally managed. I couldn't. Caprio stepped closer, lowering his voice as if afraid to disturb the memory. Why not? Harry's hands trembled as he wiped them on his pants. That envelope, he said, was given to me in 1971, Vietnam. It was the last letter a soldier wrote before he jumped on a grenade to save me. A quiet gasp rippled through the courtroom. His name was Lieutenant Mark Keating, Harry continued. Good man, smart, braver than anyone I ever knew. The night before he died, he handed me that sealed envelope and said, "Give this to my mother, but don't open it." Harry's eyes glistened. I promised him. Caprio nodded slowly. Did you try to find her? I did, Harry whispered. Years, but she passed before I ever got close, and then I couldn't bring myself to open the letter. It wasn't meant for me. Caprio held the journal gently against his chest. Mr. Mercer, may I show you something? Harry blinked. Sure. Caprio opened the journal to the page where the envelope was tucked. He slid it out with both hands. It was yellowed, edges crisp from age, sealed with a strip of glue that had darkened over 5 decades. On the front, in neat handwriting, for my mother if I don't come home. The room felt like it tilted. Every person there instinctively leaned closer. Harry stared at the envelope with a mixture of reverence and fear. I've carried it everywhere, he whispered. Even when I didn't have a roof, even when I didn't have food, I always kept it close. But I could never break that seal. Caprio looked at him carefully. May I ask you something, Mr. Mercer? Harry nodded, barely breathing. If Lieutenant Keating's mother were here today, if she could speak to you, do you think she would want that letter to die unread? Harry froze. The question hit him like an unexpected blow, truthful, painful, compassionate. No, he said after a long moment. No, I don't think she would. Caprio stepped closer and held out the envelope. Then maybe. It's time. Harry stared at the envelope, as though it were a live grenade. Your Honor, I don't know if I can. Caprio's voice dropped to a reassuring whisper. You won't be opening it alone. A long silence followed. Then Harry nodded. Caprio extended the envelope to him, but Harry's fingers shook too violently to take it, so Caprio held it between them, steady, respectful. You may read it, Harry whispered. I don't trust my hands. The judge hesitated, aware of the gravity, of the violation of privacy, of the sacredness, then nodded in solemn acceptance. He slid a finger under the brittle flap. The courtroom was so quiet that the tiny tearing sound echoed like thunder. Inside was a single folded sheet of paper. Caprio unfolded it, careful not to rip the fragile page. Harry's eyes were locked on the judge's face. What does it say? He whispered. Caprio took a slow breath and began reading. Mom, if you're reading this, then I didn't make it home. And I'm sorry. I know this isn't what you wanted, and I know this will break your heart. But I want you to know that I wasn't afraid. The room was already crying. Harry covered his mouth. Caprio continued, voice steady but thick with emotion. I saved a man today. His name is Sergeant Harold Mercer. He's stubborn, quiet, and he worries too much. But he's good. He's worth saving. And I'm glad it was him. I want you to know I wasn't alone. He held my hand. I didn't feel pain, just peace. Harry's body trembled violently. tears streaming down his face. Caprio swallowed and read on. Mom, please don't mourn me too long. Live your life. Bake your apple pies. Sing your Sunday songs. Love the way you always loved. And tell anyone who asks that your son died doing something he believed in. Tell them I went out thinking of you. Caprio steadied himself. And please, tell Sergeant Mercer that none of this is his fault. Tell him he has a good heart. Tell him he made my last moments feel safe. Harry's hand gripped the side of the cart so hard his knuckles went white. Caprio read the final line. And tell him to stop carrying the guilt. He doesn't have to carry all of us forever. Caprio lowered the letter, eyes glistening. For a moment, the courtroom felt like a cathedral quiet, reverent, holy. Harry couldn't breathe. He pressed both hands to his face, shaking uncontrollably. His sobs filled the room raw, guttural, years of pain loosening all at once. He told me not to carry it, Harry choked. All these years, and he told me not to carry it. Caprio stepped forward and placed a firm hand on his shoulder. You've honored him more than he ever could have asked for. Harry let out a broken laugh through tears. I thought I owed him. I thought I failed him. You didn't fail him, Caprio said. You fulfilled his final wish. You lived, and you carried his memory with dignity and love. Lieutenant Keating would be proud of you. Harry wiped his eyes. I never expected to hear his words. Caprio nodded. Sometimes fate waits decades to deliver what our hearts need most. Harry reached out, and Caprio placed the letter into his shaking hands. The old veteran pressed it against his chest like he was holding Mark Keating himself. Thank you, Your Honor, Harry whispered. You don't know what this means. Caprio smiled softly. I think everyone here does. Behind them, half the courtroom was crying openly. Even the officer men trained to maintain stoic faces were blinking hard, swallowing thickly. One whispered, My God, what a thing to carry. Another said, He deserved to hear that. Harry looked up, tears still running down his face, but a strange peace settling across his features, a lightness he hadn't felt in half a century. Caprio walked back toward the bench, but instead of sitting, he turned around and said, Mr. Mercer, today we witnessed courage. Not in battle, not under fire, but here telling the truth, sharing your pain, and honoring your brothers. That takes a different kind of bravery, a rarer kind. Harry lowered his gaze, emotional beyond words. And now, Caprio continued, it's time for this court to do what's right. The gallery leaned forward. Harry lifted his head, waiting. Caprio wasn't done. In fact, the most extraordinary decision of his judicial career was still ahead. Judge Caprio stood at the center of the courtroom, not behind the bench, not above anyone, but on equal ground with the man who had just reshaped the heart of everyone present. It was a moment without precedent, without rulebook, without any of the usual boundaries that defined his courtroom. And maybe that was why it felt so momentous. Justice, in its purest form, wasn't confined by procedure, it was shaped by humanity. He took a long breath and placed both hands on the bench as if steadying himself. The courtroom went silent, bracing instinctively for a ruling, but the expression on Caprio's face was not one of judgment. It was one of profound respect. Mr. Mercer, he began, voice steady but soft. This case began with a charge of shoplifting, a can of soup, $3.49. But what we've learned today, what you've shared, goes far beyond any petty offense. Harry shifted slightly, unsure where this was going. His hands gripped the arms of his chair, knuckles pale, breath unsteady. He'd come here expecting another blow from life, another routine punishment, another reminder that the world saw him as nothing more than a vagrant with a cart of junk. Instead, he had been seen truly seen for the first time in decades. Caprio reached for the case file but didn't open it. He held it in one hand, then closed it gently, as if acknowledging that the pages inside meant little compared to the truth revealed today. I want you to understand something, Mr. Mercer, the judge said. There are crimes motivated by greed, crimes motivated by anger, crimes born of cruelty or carelessness. But what you did, taking that soup, was an act of survival, and this court recognizes the difference. A murmur swept through the gallery, a collective exhale. Harry looked down, tears forming again. "I'm sorry, Your Honor. I really didn't want to steal. I was just cold and hungry." Caprio raised a hand. "You have apologized enough, Mr. Mercer. And truthfully, you have nothing to apologize for." Harry blinked, stunned. The judge continued, voice strengthening with conviction. "Mr. Mercer, this court finds you not guilty of shoplifting." Applause erupted, instantly loud, grateful, emotional. Some people stood, others covered their faces. A few whispered, "Thank God," under their breath. But Caprio wasn't finished. He waited for the applause to settle, then resumed. "However," he said, placing a hand over his heart, "justice is not merely about dismissing charges. It is about acknowledging pain, sacrifice, and humanity. And you, Mr. Mercer, have given more to this country, more to all of us, than we could ever repay." Harry lowered his head, overwhelmed. Caprio looked to the courtroom officers. "Bailiffs, please bring Mr. Mercer some water." One officer hurried forward with a bottle, opening it, and placing it into the old veteran's trembling hands. Harry whispered a thank you, still struggling to process everything unfolding around him. Caprio straightened, his voice resonating with renewed purpose. "This court is going to do something unprecedented," he continued, "something that I believe is not only necessary, but long overdue." The gallery leaned in, sensing the gravity of what was coming. Caprio turned to face everyone. "Mr. Mercer has spent 70 years carrying the memories of fallen soldiers, memories that should have been preserved by our nation, not left to a single man walking alone from state to state." Heads nodded. Some people cried harder. As such, Caprio said, "I am ordering the immediate establishment of a fund dedicated to preserving the stories, documents, and artifacts Mr. Mercer has protected all these years." Whispers. "A fund. Is that allowed?" "He's making history," Caprio continued without hesitation. "It will be called the Mercer Memorial Fund. Its purpose will be threefold. 1. Ensure Mr. Mercer has permanent housing and medical support. 2. Collect, restore, and digitize the historical items he has carried. 3. Create a public archive so that future generations can learn about the soldiers he has kept alive through their stories." Harry covered his face with both hands and sobbed. His entire body shook. Caprio stepped toward him, his voice gentle. "Mr. Mercer, you will no longer walk alone. Your journey, their journey, becomes all of ours now." The applause this time was thunderous. People stood, clapped, cried, nodded at Harry, as if saluting him. But Caprio raised a hand again. "There is more," he said, and the room grew quiet. He reached for the telephone on his bench, an old black receiver rarely used except for official calls. "This may be unconventional," he said, looking around the courtroom, "but sometimes justice requires direct action." He dialed a number by memory. The room listened as the line rang once, twice. Then a voice answered, "Rhode Island Department of Veterans Affairs, Director's Office." Caprio spoke clearly, his voice carrying authority that brooked no delay. "This is Judge Frank Caprio. I need to reinstate a veteran's benefits immediately. No paperwork delays, no waiting periods." Even Harry's head snapped up in shock. "Yes, Your Honor," the voice responded, startled. "Who is the veteran?" "Harold Mercer," Caprio said firmly. 84 years old, served in Korea and Iraq, homeless due to an administrative error. I want his benefits reinstated within 24 hours, and I want a caseworker assigned to him by the end of the day." The person on the other line stammered, We can make that happen, Your Honor." "Good," Caprio said. "Thank you." He hung up. The courtroom went silent again, not in shock now, but in awe. Harry stared at the judge, lips trembling. You did that for me." Caprio stepped closer, his smile gentle. After everything you've done for this country, Mr. Mercer, it's the least we can do." Harry shook his head. No one's ever fought for me before." Caprio placed a hand on his shoulder again. "Then let this be the first time of many." From the back of the room, a young woman stood, someone who had been quietly crying through most of the hearing. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "Your Honor, my father was a soldier. He died when I was 9. I would give anything, to know that someone remembered him the way Mr. Mercer remembers his men." She stepped forward, wiping her eyes. "I'd like to donate to the Mercer Memorial Fund." Others followed. One man raised his hand, "Me too." Then another, "Count me in." Then a woman, "I'll volunteer to help archive his collection." Then a veteran, "I'll help him move into his new place." Caprio watched the room transform into a wave of compassion. He looked back at Harry. "You see, Mr. Mercer, you've built an army again, not of soldiers, but of people who care." Harry let out a shaky laugh through tears. "I don't know what to say." Caprio squeezed his shoulder. "You don't have to say anything. Today we say it for you." But then Caprio's face softened even further, as if something personal stirred inside him. He walked back to his bench and picked up the battered journal, the one Harry had written for 70 years. He held it out to the old man. "Mr. Mercer, the stories in here deserve to be read by the world, but I want you to decide where they go." Harry took the journal reverently, fingertips brushing the duct tape binding. I want them somewhere safe," he whispered. "Somewhere they won't be forgotten." Caprio nodded. "I know just the place." Before Harry could speak, an unexpected sound filled the room, 40 people rising to their feet. Applause, not wild or frantic this time, but long, steady, reverberating. A standing ovation. Harry looked around, dazed. No courtroom in his lifetime had ever stood for him. He absorbed it slowly, like warmth spreading into a body that had been cold for too long. Caprio smiled. "Mr. Mercer, the world is finally standing for you." Harry wiped his eyes again and whispered, "Thank you, all of you, for giving me back my life." But none of them knew. The most emotional moment of all was still waiting beyond this courtroom. Harry Mercer left the courtroom that day, not as a defendant, not as a drifter pushing a cart of forgotten memories, but as a man, for the first time in decades, felt the weight on his shoulders shift onto the hands of others who cared. The gallery escorted him out as if he were a visiting dignitary, not a homeless veteran who had arrived on trembling legs hours earlier. People shook his hand, offered their phone numbers, promised meals, rides, furniture, help. A group of veterans insisted on walking with him, forming an impromptu honor guard as he stepped into the cool Providence air. For a moment, Harry simply stood on the courthouse steps, the sunlight touching his face. He closed his eyes. The wind tugged at the edges of his coat, and something inside him, something buried deep beneath grief and loneliness, finally loosened. But that was only the beginning. 3 days later, the city buzzed with news. A small one-bedroom unit had been prepared for Harry in a veteran-supported housing complex. Volunteers lined up for hours to help him move in. A local moving company offered their services free of charge. A group of college students helped organize his cart's contents with white gloves and archival boxes, treating each item like a priceless artifact. When Harry stepped into his new apartment, he froze. The space was modest, just a kitchenette, a bed, a chair, and a small table, but to him it looked like a palace. The refrigerator was full, the blankets were soft, the heat worked. On the nightstand sat a framed photograph, a printout of the courtroom's standing ovation, gifted by someone who had attended that day. Harry's hands trembled as he touched the frame. I don't deserve all this," he whispered. A caseworker smiled gently. "Sir, after what you've carried for 70 years, you deserve more than we could ever give." Harry nodded, though he still looked uncertain, as if afraid this was temporary, that someone would knock on the door and say a mistake was made. But no one did. Instead, throughout the evening, dozens of people trickled in with blankets, clothes, canned food, and handwritten letters of gratitude. That night, Harry slept in a bed for the first time in nearly a decade. He wept quietly into the pillow, not from sadness, but from a fragile, overwhelming peace. But the story didn't end there. A week later, Judge Caprio arrived at the housing complex not as a judge, not as a public figure, but as a friend. When Harry opened the door, his face lit up with genuine joy. "Your Honor," he said, voice cracking. "You came." Caprio stepped inside, smiling warmly. "I told you I would check in on you." Harry motioned toward the table. "I made coffee." "It's not fancy, but it's perfect," Caprio said, taking a seat. "Thank you." The judge glanced around the apartment. On the far wall stood the cart, now empty, cleaned, and placed like an exhibit. Beside it were shelves holding dozens of neatly labeled boxes, the beginnings of what would become the Mercer Memorial Archive. Caprio's eyes softened. "This place suits you." "It's warm," Harry said quietly. "That's more than I've had in years." They talked for hours, not about war or death or the past, but about ordinary things. Movies they liked, food they missed, the odd humor of getting old. Caprio laughed more that afternoon than he had in months. Eventually, Harry reached under his bed and pulled out a small wooden chest, different from the one containing the 12 names. "I have something for you," he said, placing it gently on the table. Caprio blinked. "For me?" Harry nodded. "You gave me back my dignity, my home, my purpose. I want you to have this." The judge opened the box slowly. Inside lay a journal, not the battered war journal, but another one, older, with leather cracked from age and embossed with the letters HM. Across the bottom was a date, 1951. Caprio ran a hand over the cover. "This is yours." "One of my first," Harry said. "I wrote it during my first months in Korea. It's the only thing I saved from before the Valley attack. I want you to have it. For safekeeping." Caprio looked up, eyes shining. "Harry, I can't take this. It belongs to your story." Harry shook his head gently. "My story is safe now. But you kept me alive long enough to give it away. Please, I want you to have it." Caprio hesitated, then accepted it with both hands, bowing his head slightly, as though receiving something sacred. Harry smiled softly. "Now I can rest a little easier." But fate had its own plans. 1 month later, the city of Providence awoke to heartbreaking news. Judge Frank Caprio, beloved jurist, humanitarian, and symbol of compassion, had passed away peacefully in his sleep. The announcement rippled through the city like a shockwave. Newspapers printed his photograph with headlines like "A Giant of Justice Passes" and "The People's Judge Has Left Us." At the veteran housing complex, Harry read the news 3 times before the words sank in. His hands shook violently, his breath grew shallow. And then, with the quiet determination that had carried him across 7 decades, he reached for the one item he knew he must bring. Lieutenant Mark Keating's letter. The one that had freed him. The one that had finally allowed him to stop carrying guilt. Harry walked the 3 miles to the church where Caprio's funeral was being held. People gasped when he arrived, not because he looked out of place, but because they recognized him. The old man with the cart, the war historian, the guardian of memories. A staff member approached respectfully. "Sir, would you like to sit with the family?" Harry nodded gratefully. They guided him to the front row where Caprio's children embraced him without hesitation. "Thank you for being here," one whispered. "He spoke about you often," said another. Harry swallowed hard. "Your father saved me. He saved them too." When the service began, the pastor spoke eloquently about Caprio's compassion, fairness, and legacy. But Harry barely heard the words. His focus was on the portrait at the front of the room, Caprio smiling, gentle, eyes full of kindness. When the moment came for personal tributes, Harry rose slowly. A hush fell over the sanctuary. He stepped forward, gripping the lectern with trembling hands. I "I didn't know Judge Caprio long," he began. "But the day I met him was the day I stopped being invisible." The room leaned in. He didn't just listen to my story. He lifted it. He honored it. He made sure the men I carried weren't forgotten. Harry reached into his coat and pulled out the letter. "This," he said, unfolding the fragile page, "is the last message of a soldier who died saving me. It gave me peace, and I want Judge Caprio to have the same." He placed the letter gently beside the casket. "Rest now, Judge," Harry whispered. "I'll carry this one for you." A soft gasp spread through the room. Tears flowed openly. And in that moment, standing beside the casket of the man who had changed his life, Harry felt something settle inside him. Not grief, not loss, but completion. After the service, Harry walked alone to the cemetery. The wind blew gently through the trees, lifting the edges of his coat. He stopped before Caprio's fresh grave. The soil was still soft, the flowers still bright. Harry placed a hand over the earth. "You gave me back my brothers," he whispered, "and my country gave me back a home. I won't forget any of it." He stood there a long time, long enough for the sun to dip low, long enough for the wind to grow colder. When he finally turned to leave, he paused, looked back once more, and smiled, tired, grateful, peaceful. He whispered one final promise: "I'll make sure they remember you too." Then Harry Mercer, 84 years old, veteran of 2 wars, guardian of hundreds of fallen soldiers, walked slowly down the cemetery path. Not as a man burdened by ghosts, but as a man carrying a legacy he would honor and share and protect for the rest of his days. Some stories remind us not of what people have done wrong, but of what human beings are capable of when compassion meets courage. Harry Mercer's life shows us that even those carrying invisible wounds can become guardians of history. Judge Caprio's final act teaches us that kindness, when given at the right moment, can change the course of a life. In our world, countless people carry silent burdenstramas, memories, sacrifices no one sees. Maybe someone you know is quietly fighting their own battle. Maybe someone near you is waiting for a moment of kindness to remind them they matter. Tell me in the comments, who is someone in your life who deserves to be remembered, honored, or thanked? And if this story touched you, make sure to subscribe for more powerful narratives like this one.